Welcome back to the Bourbon BS podcast, everyone. This is episode 336, part 2. That's Nate cutting a cigar. For those of you that find us on part 2 here, we were joined on part 1. The original plan was to have them on part 2. They both had to enjoy their evenings, right? You know, sometimes this podcast can be a long commitment in an evening. So for most, sometimes for us as well. So we had Greg and Rick on from Four Branches Bourbon. Great story behind that. We're going to be drinking some more of that as we go into part 2. Also, you're lighting up. What are you lighting up there, Nate, from Altadis USA here?
This is the Romeo y Julieta Reserve Real Nicaragua. We actually featured this one recently with the one that's got the barber pole.
Yeah.
Or the pinstripe. Twisted Love.
Midnight Twist.
There it is. Nice job.
There it is. Yep.
Yeah. Is this one coming out of AJ?
Yeah.
Yep. That's what I thought.
AJ Fernandez for Romeo y Julieta and Altadis USA. I am still smoking on the CAO Fasa Sombra, which we also featured. Touched on lightly just because we had on some special guests for part 1, but we did touch on this one as well. Definitely enjoying it. Check out part 1 if you guys haven't listened to it yet on the audio or Facebook. Or Facebook's now going to be taking off the videos after a certain amount of time, actually fairly short period of time. So we're going to have to really start pushing the YouTube aspect of this podcast just to keep those things live on there for all of our listeners. But yeah, thanks to Tinder Box at Easton, Columbus, Ohio. Tomorrow night, come on in to Tinder Box if you're in the Columbus area to meet Ricky Rodriguez from West Tampa Tobacco. He's been on the show. He's going to be in. One of the nice things that Tinderbox is going to have featured as available for purchase is the limited edition Devil Crab. So that's going to be part of some of the specials tomorrow, and it's just going to be a cut and light there. Altadis USA, like I mentioned, Cigar Company, Gold and Silver. Thank you very much for the continued support. Buyjack.com/bourbonandbs for the shirts. I do now have on one of mine from them is the blue hoodie.
Which I have mine in my bag, but it goes great with the Nicaraguan blue
and white. There you go. Fantastic. But also Nate's got on the Pour One More, Light Up Another. We'll figure this out together shirt, which is the podcast shirt, all available on buyjack.com/bourbonandbs for that. And thanks to our Patreon members, patreon.com/bourbonandbs podcast or Venmo for one-time contributions at Bourbon and BS. Tonight, we're going to be doing something, again, originally was designed for our guests. So we're going to have to count on you guys out there in the audience. And Nate and I talking about what we have going on in our lives, which sometimes you guys care about, sometimes you don't, which is fine.
We care about each other.
You said it weird.
Well, I got to go there.
You said it weird. The way I frame this for if they were able to stick around, each of the guys, and we all do, have had new chapters in their careers and likely elsewhere in life. Let's chat about our new adventures. We'll go to you guys in the audience, what you guys have, but
actually, you and I both have some new ones coming up.
What do you got going on?
Well, so as of last week, and then starting next week, I'll have a new boss.
Okay. So dealing with leadership changes. Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, my current boss is still going to stay around for a little bit and help get that person up to speed.
Yeah.
Because our store runs a little differently than a lot of other stores in town. But, we're a store that's been voted by the people in Columbus as #1 wine store in Columbus for the last 3 years.
The people have spoken.
So now we're bringing someone who's got a ton of experience in the industry coming to our store. And so catching them up to speed on, how things typically go in our store. Obviously that person in time is going to put their own touch on things and do things a little different than the gentleman who hired me. But I'm looking forward to it. Actually, I've met this person multiple times. I've had conversations with them. I've met them at, distributor tastings, portfolio tastings around town and stuff like that. So it is going to be new, but, so obviously all of our team has to adapt to that because they're going to be taking over a department that is a very large chunk of the company business.
Yeah.
So that, you know, they've got a lot to do on that side. It also means, you know, there might be some additional responsibilities coming my way. So
Nice.
yeah.
So if you guys are watching live, you will see live comments coming up on the screen. We're trying something a little different there. So careful what you say on the feed. If you guys can read that. Ray says, how do you feel about that, Nate?
I think I answered that.
Okay, good. Good.
I know there's a little bit of a delay, Ray, so just give it a second.
Give a little bit of time. So with that, like with careers, a lot of times, you know, when you have changes in leadership, I feel like sometimes you have one of the two, right? You have one of the two or a little bit of a combination. You're excited about the change, or you're kind of not willing to let go of what you're used to.
I see that. Yeah. Yeah. I've had those.
So you like, even with this particular one, I think it resonates with some people there that you may have had ups and downs with the previous leadership, but now you have a new one in. Question of the unknown, right? You know, are you looking forward to it? Or I guess if they're listening, I should say the right thing.
No, I am looking forward to it. You know, this person, like I said, this person has a lot of experience in the industry. You know, essentially at their still current place, they just kind of had too much thrust upon them, too much responsibility from outside departments.
Yeah.
That like someone would leave the company, and then whatever they were doing, the owners of the company would just sit there and go, "Oh, here, you take that on."
Yeah.
And so that person just kept taking on more and more things that weren't what, you know, they were originally hired on to do, and they weren't properly being compensated for it. So they're like, I can't do 20 million different things.
Got it.
You know, this department is why I'm here, but you got me stretched too thin. So sometimes when you start taking on too much and you get stretched too thin, you don't do everything well. Like sometimes, you know, other areas kind of take a back seat. You know, you may falter in one area because you're not dedicated and focused on that particular thing. So I'm excited because I think this change for that person is going to allow them to focus more on a smaller field of responsibilities. And because of that, and the amount of things that person's going to be in charge of is not as many things as what my current boss is in charge of.
So it's changes all around, right?
Yes, there's changes all over. So I think it'll be good in the long run because that person will be more hyper focused on this aspect of the business, and they'll be able to put all their energy and time into that and not be stretched where they don't have time to balance everything that previous was doing. So I am looking forward to it. You know, initially the way I found out, we're like, why the hell are we finding out this way? I'm not going to go into how we found out, but no, when I found out who it was, I was like, oh, okay.
Makes sense.
I'm all right. I'm good with that. When I found out who it was that was coming on, I was like, all right, I'm good with that.
Ryan knows something about
that. yeah. Ryan could grab the mic and chime in if he wanted to.
I don't think he wants to.
He likes that rocking chair.
Yeah, he's very comfortable. Let's put a mic, like a boom mic, over those two. Yeah, the next adventure thing, you know, one of the things that I was thinking of when we had the guests that we were going to try to keep on for part 2 was, you know, I mean, you have these people that have had these illustrious careers in what they were doing, and now they're moving on to something different. It's amazing to me, you know, looking back, not nearly as impressive, and that's me being accurately humble with that, because, you know, you had guys with his 4 branches that, you know, they had when he started listing off some of the things that they had done you know, in the military.
As soon as he said, after I did my 2 tours and then joined the CIA, I was like,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
What? And then he specifically said gray man. I was like, whoa.
Yeah, we're in the wrong room.
Okay.
But it's interesting, you know, with those things, you know, the next adventure is, you know, and looking around the garage, these guys have done the same thing. But, you know, doing the cigar thing now for 12 going on 13 years, having conversations with people just recently about my previous career, it's interesting more or less to look back on when you talk about, it's easy to talk about your next adventure, your previous, you know, or your future endeavors, but you never know when the future endeavors are going to come. So looking back on those things, that's what I wanted to hear from those guys. And because it resonates with me, is that it seems like forever ago, you know, being in a different industry, doing something different. When you were describing to the guys that came on tonight that, you know, we've been doing this podcast for as long as we have, it's just, all of that seems like a long time ago. And like not knowing going into it that that's how much time, when things were uncertain or when things were going to be like changing in my life, it was the fact that you look back at how long ago it had been since you maybe started your venture that you're on. But one of the things that I try to, and maybe you guys do the same thing, but the things I try to do is, when you start reflecting on some of that stuff, is that, have you made the most of the time you've been doing what you're doing? You know, have you been doing everything that, you know, in your career, you're excited at first. Every time, you know, someone starts something new, typically everyone's excited about it for whatever reason. Either they're not doing what they were doing before, or they were really excited about the industry that they went in. And looking at the past when you're in that future, right, is do you still have that excitement? Chances are no, and you have to actually work on it, right?
Yeah. There's a lot of people that when they start something new, after a year or two, they just fall back into the same rut, same routine, and it's like, all right, now I'm tired of this. You know, they say when you give an employee a raise, that'll keep them happy for about 4 months.
That's short. I thought it'd be a couple of years. You know, it depends on the person.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, you sit there and you start something, there's that honeymoon phase where you're really excited about it. And then later on it clicks back into, it's a job. It's what I have to do every day. You know, get up in the morning, you know, all the same issues personally that you may have had with the previous career, like you still bring back into the new one because it's still a job. That one was a job. This is a job. And you know, the trick is, how do you not get tired of it? How do you keep the energy? And
well, I can speak from experience that, you know, and yes, everything becomes a job, you know, doing what I'm doing now in the last, you know, 12 plus years. There are times that you do have to push yourself, especially depending on what opportunities for advancement and growth are available. But I mean, my previous career was something that I got a promotion, it seemed like every 2, maybe to 3 years. And every time I was about to be done with it and I was annoyed with it and everything else, I got another promotion, and it's like I stuck around. And I was in that career for 10 years, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Until they called me out, in a sense, not like that literally, but like I was bored. The last position I was in was 3 years, and I didn't like the direction the company was going. I didn't like my day-to-day life, and I wasn't happy, and there were no other promotions
to be
other
had,
than
become
to buy the company,
exactly,
which was part of the conversation. And I got to be honest, I'm glad that did not come to fruition, because I look at my life now, the last 12 plus years, I don't think I would like where that would have led. The level of stress and the level of staying in an industry that I really didn't have much passion in.
Well, because you've told the story. It started out as a college summer job.
The summer job gone wrong. It went wrong very well for a long time. But it was something that I just didn't really. I think part of it was the leadership above me I didn't really kind of mesh well with. And I think that's something that sometimes, the next venture, it's been a heck of a ride with the current thing I've been doing. And it's led me to even doing this show and meeting the people like in the garage and meeting people like we just had on, Rick and Greg. And who would have thought that when I was managing, and running a moving company.
Yeah.
Probably would not, would have had a conflict of interest.
Mhm.
We just met someone at Watershed's last event here.
Yeah.
That literally his career was questioned and then absolutely defined that you can't do both.
Yeah.
You can't have an interest in an industry that, for whatever reason from the public eye that doesn't really mesh well with what they're doing.
Yeah. Like they gave him an ultimatum, basically.
He was like, okay.
All right, bye. And they're like, wait, what?
Yeah,
they thought he was going to take his career over the social media career he had. And then when he chose the social media career, they're like, oh, yeah. But, it's, he loved both jobs, but then it's like, all right, he's like, I can get another job somewhere else. I can do that job somewhere else. I can do this all the time. And, some of the social media channels and stuff, they may make enough to where it's supplemental income, but then it's like, or I'm making enough to where I can just quit my day job, and the social media becomes the day job.
Or that is your goal going forward, is you got to make money doing something. You know what I mean? And he might, I don't know, I just met him, but he might have to do something on the side just to keep things going. I don't know what his savings is. I don't know what he's bringing in from social media. It's tough from an alcohol or a tobacco side of things because you can't monetize it as easy. But even if you have followers, who knows? He seemed like a nice guy, and I wish him the best. Since it's just us, Nate, and you guys out there listening, is it okay not to seek your next adventure when it comes to a career? And I phrased that specifically the way I phrased it.
So
you can take it however you want.
So there are some people that I think all they're focused on is the next step.
Mm-hmm.
And so they view what they're currently doing as a step for what they want to do next. And then they get to that job and they're like, all right, now how do I use this to get to my next step? And so they're always focused on the next step and not necessarily putting themselves entirely into what they're doing now.
Yeah.
I witnessed a lot of that when I worked for AEP. I had applied to be, I applied and was interviewed to be the manager of the team I was on.
Mm-hmm.
And when they had asked the question, like, where do you see yourself going? Where do you want to be in 5 years? That bullshit. I had actually said, well, if I'm doing a good job in 5 years, I still want to be here. And I explained, I said, look, here's the issue that you've had previously. I went through 4 managers in 4 years. I had the one that initially hired me. And then when they moved to a different department, the one that came in after was in that role for 6 months. Then they moved on to another position. And then the next person was there for a year and a half. And then they moved on to another position. So then I had a 4th manager who was then looking for. So when I interviewed, I tried to use that as one of the strengths or advantages to hiring me for that role. Like, you're not gonna, if you hire me for that role, I'm not the kind of person that's only going to view that role as a stepping stone for the next title.
Yeah.
Like, I'm the only person on this team in the last 3 years who's actually done this job. So I know, I've worked with all these people. I know the job. If someone calls off sick, I know how to cover for that person. I know how to do their job.
What if you call off sick?
Huh?
What if you called off sick?
There were other people that could do that, but
good.
The problem was the manager didn't. The manager didn't know how to do the job I was doing. So all of my workload, being the most of anyone on the team, that got dispersed to the rest of the team. And when I left that position, my workload got divided among 3 different people. They had to and bring on another person. They had to have 3 people do what I was doing, just because of the volume that I was doing. So I tried to use that to my advantage in that interview. Is I got the experience with the team. I know the job, and I'm, I ended up not getting the job. The person who was in charge of hiring for that position said, well, you're better from a technical standpoint. We think this person is a safer bet from a managerial standpoint. And she actually said, I only expect this person to be here for 1.5 or 2 years. And I was like, oh, so in 2 years, you're going to be right back where you are right now.
Yep.
And you're going to have to hire someone else. Okay. and that team just went through that same thing again. A person who I worked with that was on that team still, they applied for that position and they got interviewed for that position, and the company went someplace else. They hired someone from outside that team. And I get sometimes you want to hire someone from outside the team because sometimes internally you have people that are that play favorites because they've worked with certain people or they have certain friends on the team. And you kind of want that outside, no bias or anything like that. But at the same time, you have to have someone, I think, like if there's an issue on the team, if all of a sudden something tragic happens to someone on the team or they can't come in, like, okay, who's picking up the slack? Is it the whole team picking up the slack? Like their workload just gets dumped on everyone else. Like if it's one day, like you should have someone in charge who can sit there and say, hey, you know what? I can help out. I can't, because they're in a management position, they can't necessarily spend the entire 8 hours of the day doing that person's job. But it is so beneficial to have someone above you that if someone calls off or someone's sick that day, that person can take some of the pressure off the team. And that they felt otherwise.
And there you were on to your next adventure.
Yes. Yeah. So, and that's one of the reasons why I left that team and went to a different department within the company.
Yeah.
Part of it was because I had heard how much that department was struggling. They didn't have enough people. They had too much work going on. Things were falling behind. And so, I transitioned to that department because I felt then I'd have a better chance of being able to move up from that department. But then, you spend the first month not even being trained on a single thing. And you're just sitting in front of your laptop, but watching TV or playing video games all day because they won't teach you anything. Because the manager's like, no, I'm so busy doing other stuff. I don't have time to train you.
You got good at those video games, though.
I watched a lot of movies. That first 6 months, I mean, I was averaging like 2 hours of work a week. And for someone who went from the highest volume at my previous team to then having 2 hours of work a week, it drove me nuts.
Most people be like, this is amazing.
Yeah, so I actually told the VP of the division when they asked me, hey, how's the new job going? I literally said to that person, I didn't realize AEP had a welfare program.
Yeah.
Because I'm getting paid to do absolutely nothing.
Probably not the best thing to say.
I didn't give a shit. Because that person was excited that I was joining that team. So then when I tell the VP, I've been here for a month and they haven't taught me how to do a single fucking thing. They're like, oh, okay, we need to change that. And, eventually it got to the point where, yes, I would have, 5-6 hours of work a day.
Changing a little bit, but staying on this, we'll keep it with our first part here with cigars and whiskey and talking about this. Is there a parallel in like the overall personality with people in their everyday life that smoke the same cigar or same broaden a little bit, 3 to 5 cigars, and the people that they only drink what they know, like they only drink the certain whiskeys or bourbons that they know? How does that compare and contrast to people that are constantly just trying what's new?
Well, I think it's important.
What's the mentality, and does that kind of apply to just that mentality towards life?
when it comes to spirits and tobacco industry, I think it is important to try new things. Companies are doing a lot of different things. You're trying different tobacco combinations, different flavor profiles. You're finding things that you like, because guess what? Sometimes these companies stuff runs on back order. Sometimes they're out of, a shop runs out of your favorite cigar. Okay, what are you going to smoke next? Or are you just going to sit there and say, no, I'm not going to smoke anything until it's back on the shelf?
Right.
You can't pigeonhole yourself into, just one small division. I used to have a customer at my first shop. It was a Rocky Patel. It was the ones that came in like the 50 count crate.
Edge.
The Edge. Well, yeah, it was the Edge, double Churchill or something, whatever that was.
Toros did too. I mean,
that's how they came. But no, the Churchill size one. I think it's called like the double Churchill or something like that.
Yeah. That
was all that guy smoked. And he'd smoke 3 of them a day.
Yeah.
But that's all he smoked.
Good sales.
So then we do a Rocky Patel event, and he decides, I'm gonna try this one. I was like, Larry, that cigar is the exact opposite of what you smoke. You smoke the Edge Light, and now you're gonna smoke the Super Ligero.
Now called the Connecticut, the light is.
Yeah. But
Can't say light.
Yeah. But then he went and bought a Super Ligero, if you remember when that cigar came out.
The opposite of light, which you can't say light anymore.
Yes. So it's a full body, spicy, just very heavy cigar. And he liked it. He ended up loving that cigar. And I'm like, you've gone years just smoking that one frickin' cigar, and then now all of a sudden you smoke something the complete opposite end of the spectrum. Like, this is really good. I'm like, think about all the cigars you've missed out on smoking. Same thing with those whiskey guys. They smoke or they drink, those same 3 bottles all the time. Yeah. And then it's like, oh,
they try the 4th one and they just like, nope, don't like that one. And that's it.
Yeah. And
breaks on everything else.
Yeah. And being in the cigar industry, you get asked by a lot of customers, like, what's your favorite cigar?
Yeah.
Stuff like that. I have an answer to that one, but I smoke a ton of stuff. When people come in a Tinder Box, I look and they're like, what do you smoke? I'm like, all right, you see that wall? There's less than 10 things on this wall that I've not smoked. I have some of my favorites that I smoke regularly.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's difference. Yeah.
But I smoke it all. When I get people that ask me like what my favorite bourbon is, I don't have an answer.
Tough question.
Because I drink so many different ones for so many different reasons. Yes, I drink some cask strength stuff. I drink 90 proofs. I drink source stuff. I drink single barrels. I drink finished stuff, like just all over the place. And I tell them, it's like, it's easier for me to just go into one column on the shelves and go, all right, here's my favorite bottle from this column. Here's my favorite bottle from this column. But I still drink so many different ones because being on the retail side, if customers come in and they're looking for something, or they're looking like, here's what I like, what do you have, or what's something else I should try? If all I drink is 3 out of the 100 different bourbons on the shelf, I'm going to suck at my job at making recommendations because I only know 3 of the products. If I sit there and try and sell them anything else, I'm lying out of my ass. So, that's part of the benefit of trying so many different things, is because then you can have a conversation about different products. But again, on the retail side, you can help steer someone to what they're looking for. It may be slightly different, or it could be a step up and just have kind of that same flavor profile. Like, there are certain products I say on the shelf, I'm like, all right, do you like these 3 flavors? Like, yeah, I do. I'm like, okay, this bottle right here is that, but amped up a notch.
Do you think there's mentality though? Like, just you said all that stuff specifically, about the whiskey and the cigars, but what about just the mentality of those people in life? Do you think that they're doing the same thing over and over again, day in, day out? They're pleased with that, or they're comfortable with that? I mean,
those are the people that don't go on too many adventures. They go on the same vacation every year. They don't try different things. They go to work. They
wrong with that. There's not a right or wrong answer to this.
It's their comfort zone.
Yeah.
And some people like being in that little comfort box. Some people thrive on trying other things because trying other things kind of brings that little excitement, that little spice to life in there. They may not like that. You don't necessarily take someone who's never left the house in the last 5 years and go, hey, you want to go skydiving? Like that might be a little too extreme.
Might be good for them.
It might.
Yeah. Or just jump off that roof.
Well, wow.
Not like bad. Like it's like a ranch. You know what I mean? Like just like a little bit of a thrill. Put a mattress down, whatever. You know what I mean?
You're talking about like a skyscraper.
No, I'm not saying. Geez. I mean, they weren't living in a high rise. I'm saying like, they didn't leave the house. I'm thinking like, something, baby steps off of a ranch.
Yeah.
It's just wake them up a little bit, Try something different instead of walking out the front door.
Instead of walking out the front door, jump off the roof
of a ranch. It's not. You're not gonna die. You might hurt yourself a little bit.
Yeah, anything over 8 feet, you're bound to break an ankle.
You got to tuck and roll. You time it up.
Parkour.
That's right. You think what I'm thinking? Aim for the bushes.
Oh, that was the best part of that movie.
It's a great part of the movie.
We were watching it in theater, and I kept looking at Jess going, where's the bushes? What bushes? The whole way down, because it's slow. What bushes? What? Oh.
Ray Cheshire out there, he's commenting, of course, talking about that. It's their culture. Adventurous people are that way in everything they do. They typically are. I think there's the extremes both ways. And that's where it's sometimes, again, when I came up with the topic of your next adventure, because of the guest that we had on, it's at some point, certain things are naturally coming to a close, whether it be your career or, like with Rick being, the military, and then the gray man and all that stuff, like wild to think about. Now he's working on a spirit company. You got a guy there that's like a little bit more extreme, clearly based on the mentality, being a Marine and everything else, definitely wired differently. And you have someone like Greg Snyder, who's been in the industry for a long time, but he's started a lot of different things. So I see both sides of it. And that's where I was kind of listening to what, Ray's saying there, that adventurous people do it all the time. This is what they do. They're just constantly going for the next high. But I don't think there's anything wrong or like I said, right. But I like the middle ground, right? I like the fact that you have some constants in your life of things that you're comfortable with, that you're happy with. Obviously committed relationships, sometimes jobs and careers, but you're also open to new opportunities.
Yeah.
It doesn't always have to be this stark contrast of what you were doing or who you were as a person, and then going forward into this, like, no one's going to recognize me in this next career, or this next relationship, or just in my next hobby or whatever. It's always interesting to me, and I don't know if you've had these, or you guys have had this, or you guys listening out there, where you see someone you haven't seen in 10 years or more, and it's like they are just completely different. And I always wonder how they got to that point. Why did they get to that point? Were they not enjoying their lives? Did something happen to them and stuff like that? I sometimes think that with the next adventure, it's not always something that you're seeking out. It's something put upon you, and how you react to life circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
It's always fascinating to me that the people that also sometimes seem the most consistent, if you really have this dialed in conversation with them, to stay on that path, they've dealt with a lot of adversity to stay on the path that they're on. I think, Greg, who is, if you guys listen to part one, and we've had him on the show before, is that he's been in the same industry for 4 decades plus, but at the same time, you talked about, his resume, and he's been all over the board doing similar things, but working with different people. And it's really cool to see it. Go ahead.
And I think for him, that's been, part of the challenge for him. I remember the first time we had him on, he talked about his days when he was at Wild Turkey, and coming up with the concept for what became Russell's Reserve.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was such a cool story to hear him talk about. And then, he retired after 42 years in that industry,
Mm-hmm.
and but he didn't necessarily leave it because he decided as a retirement, I'm going to become a consultant.
Yeah, signs contracts.
I'm going to work, who I want to work for and when I want to work, kind of thing. Like I'm going to consult people. I don't necessarily work for them, but then all of a sudden he gets snatched up by a newer company, old name that's been around since 1856, but then was revitalized within the last 15 years. And like when the owner of that brand, we talked about Chicken Cock, the owner of that brand, when he asked Greg to come work for him, Greg turned him down initially because everything that brand was making at that point was all flavored whiskey. And because of the stuff that Greg had worked on in his career and the stuff that the creations he had been a part of, that's not where he felt a passion. And he's like, no, I'm not going to do that. If I'm going to go back into that industry, like this is what I'm doing. And the owner of that business, kudos for that guy, because he's like, all right, cool, I'll do that. I'll completely change what we're putting out. And, you obviously have a lot more experience in this industry than I do. I'll listen to you. If that's where you think we should go to be successful, let's do it. And that was successful for that brand. It was successful for Greg, for the owner. And then Greg talked about in part one there, when we were asking him, where he came and how they all kind of met up and hooked up, his contract with them was up, and Greg's like, there's nothing else really I can do for you. Like I've started you from the ground up and, put you on the path where you are. There's nothing else I can do. Like you guys have the ability to just carry this forward. And then, now another group is like, hey, we want you to come help us out. Cause now we're a young brand, a new brand that's starting, and we need someone who has done this for a while and knows what the hell is going on. Cause we're just guys that drink whiskey. We don't know how to blend, how to distill, and, the marketing side of things. And so he's like, all right, and Greg started last month.
Very recent.
Yes. So, that's another one of those things where now that's a new opportunity for him to do the same thing he's done before, but it's a new group. It's a new project. There's a new concept behind it. So that's that new challenge.
Same but different.
Even though it's the same industry and kind of doing the same thing, slightly different, but it's still something he's comfortable with. But now it's a new group, and how do you get that ball rolling? So.
Yeah, you commented on the fact that, like, when people get a raise or they get a new position or whatever, there's a short-lived honeymoon phase. It's always fascinating to me that me personally been going through a lot of the new stuff lately, and it's something that I actually strive for, which I don't mean this in a complacent way, but to take something new and make it feel the kind of right everyday living type of a situation, right? New relationship, not anymore, but new house, new career 12 years ago. All this stuff is that my mentality now is that anytime something new comes around, I want it to make it feel like the norm. Like this is right. It's a self-justification of confidence in your decisions. And I am of the opinion that a lot of people will stay focused on the change longer than they should. You know what I mean? Like they stay focused on the change of what they're doing as opposed to embracing the change and really trying to, as I said to Rick earlier, is like all in. You know what I mean? It's this commitment level of something that as you go through more changes in your life, no matter what the arena is that I think that there's something that is to be said for the people that go all in on these changes in their life, whether it be career or personal life or whatever it might be, health or just everyday growth as an individual that there's this resistance for a lot of people to actually embrace the going forward.
Well, I think there's a lot of people that once they find a comfort zone, they don't ever want to leave that. They don't want to do anything to disrupt that.
And they hold on to it.
Yeah. And I think some of that, to an extent, it's not universal, but to an extent, that's also a generational thing. I've talked about before where my dad worked for the same company from the time he was 18 until he was 55 and retired. And growing up, I always heard my dad, not always, but a lot of times he would, bitch and moan about how his day was. And he was doing the same thing every day. He was going to the same offices every day. He was meeting the same people every single day. But he never had a desire to change that. He's like, nope, this is what I'm doing. This provides for my family. I'm not going to do anything whatsoever to potentially jeopardize that. I'm just going to ride it out for as long as I can. And that's why when I left my first career to pursue something I was passionate about, I'm driving to the interview and my dad calls me. He's like, hey, what are you up to? I'm like, oh, I'm driving up, for the interview for this job. And he goes, well, I hope the interview goes well, but not too well. Because he thought the company I was working for at that time, that was one of those companies that once you get on, you don't leave. Like you stay with that company until you retire. And I was like, hey, you know what? That may have worked out well for you. But I also remember those days as a kid where you bitched and moaned about your job every single day. So, obviously whatever you're doing in a career, you're going to have those days where things don't go right. You have bad days. You may have a stretch of bad days. As long as that is, the exception and not the norm, you can stick with it. But nowadays, I think you have too many people, especially younger people, that the first sign of adversity in a career or a relationship, they jump ship to the next thing. And so they're always, I think the problem with them is they're always trying to find the comfort zone, but they never develop the ability to actually work through problems. They don't work through how to deal with issues, with stress, with resistance. They're just like, oh, well, you know what? My boss came down on me today. That's never happened. I don't like that. I'm going to go find someone else to work for. It's like you never work on that relationship. You never work on how to deal with adversity. So yes, you're changing things all the time, but you're never growing as a person. Because at the first sign of adversity, you're just tuck tail and run away. But then you have the other side of it where you have the same people that will sit there and take all the shit thrown at them and never do anything to change their life. They just deal with it and move on.
Which is not a great day-to-day life, right? You have to have those conversations. You have to be able to confront those types of scenarios that get thrown your way. Yeah, I mean, that's tough when people just sit there and take it, because that affects every like 360 on their life. It really does. And they don't really, unfortunately, get it until it's too late when, other factors or other people make the call for them, in my opinion.
I think Kristen had
I'm looking for, What's your most unexpected adventure?
I can think of two. One was leaving my first career doing animal toxicology and pharmacology research to become a cigar sales rep. Like that was
not the same
drastic change. It was one of those where a hobby, I was hoping that a hobby, because at that time I was also working part-time at a cigar shop. So it was one of those where you're hoping a hobby turns into a career. That was one. I would say the other one in my life first started when I got engaged, because when Jess and I got engaged, we had been dating for 10 months, I want to say. And up until that point, I had never had a relationship that lasted more than 4. So being with someone that long to then take that step, like that was scary a little bit.
Exciting, you mean?
Both.
Yeah, sure.
It was exciting, but it was also scary. Like I've never been in this position. I've never been engaged before. Well, what comes after that? You get married. I've never been married before. So it's like, so then when you deal with, the issues that you deal with as a couple, it's like, those first several years of marriage, you had issues come up that neither one of us had ever dealt with in a relationship before.
Mm-hmm.
Because I had never been in a relationship that long. Jess had never been in a relationship, period. So
I'd like to ask her that question. Most unexpected adventure.
She's listening.
Is she?
She'll probably text me her answer.
Yeah, she never comments like Kristen does.
It's because she's usually watching this.
Sniper over here.
Yeah. She's usually watching
direct hit.
She's usually watching this on the TV downstairs on YouTube. And then to be able to type out an answer on YouTube would take forever using a PlayStation remote or a TV remote. So she's going to sit there and just text me the answer because it's a lot quicker.
Sure.
How about you?
For sure. Similar with the job thing, when I was let go for the first time from my previous career, it was sudden. I've talked about it on the podcast before. It was after, over a decade of work, and was told from the owner of the company that, to my credit, he said, I know when this happens, you make sure that someone is not surprised by the point of the meeting. And that's not the case today. So for that to come up to me, to take the company in a different direction, that was absolutely my most unexpected adventure, is what I've been doing the last, again, 12 plus years doing this. She asked it. I don't know if it was aimed towards me, but this phase of my life has been quite the adventure in a lot of ways. It's interesting to hear you say what you're saying. I was married before, divorced. To hear you say that, it's the second time today that I had someone tell me that the day of their wedding, especially, more specifically, they were extremely nervous. And they were telling me that, they were in the church. They remember the day because we were talking about me, getting married here to Kristen, which, I'm excited about. I'm maybe not stressed enough about it. If you ask Kristen, just because, it's something that I am 100% dialed in on. And when I was married before, going through that, it was at a much younger age. And, you kind of said it, in my opinion, very accurately. It's like, all right, so you're engaged for the first time. Now you're getting married for the first time. You don't know what to expect. Listening to the person I was talking to today, they were at the church and they were, in the room with the priest, I think he said. And, how do we know when it's time to go out there? And it's like, you'll know, I'll tell you, and all this stuff. And he was talking about how nervous he was. And I think at this part of my life, going through all that again, it doesn't seem like going through it again.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure I'll have some nerves that, are we doing it the right way? Are we making sure that, obviously she's happy? I say this aggressively, but not truly, but like, I could care less what anyone else thinks, other than her. So there's no, the adventure that I'm on right now in this point in my life, there's consistency at work, more or less. I feel a consistency with my personal life, and the adventure sometimes doesn't have to be the thrill-seeking adventure. In no way is it complacent or boring. It's in every way it's exciting and enjoyable. But when it feels right in a lot of ways, if not every way, it's the everyday life around it that you're kind of, how does everyday life look around you when you're dealing with something that you feel is good and natural, right?
Mhm.
And that's probably an unexpected adventure, especially at the point, Nate, you knew me when I was before I met Kristen. It was like I had gotten to the point after some adversity that I was just like, I'm good. You know what I mean? It's they say the best things that come to you is typically when you are at your best personally. And I think that's kind of where I'm at. So I mean, it's an odd question. Appreciate it, especially coming from Kristen. It's take care of yourself first, and then you can be prepared to really accept both positive, but also negative. But I think more importantly, positive. That when things are coming your way, you're prepared to deal with all that stuff, as opposed to what you were saying. That it's first time around doing all that stuff, and hopefully the last time around doing all that stuff for both of us at this
Yeah.
point. But it's there are some nerves there, but the adventure doesn't. I mean, you can be excited about it. Having the nervous feelings, I think, is natural, but I think it's something that if you're all about it, the nerves really do fade to the background.
Well, and you talking about what that person said, it made me think, and it's for slightly different reasons that I won't go into, but I remember in the months, weeks, and then days leading up to our wedding, I would have coworkers asking me if I was nervous.
Yeah.
And I wasn't. Again, slightly different reasons than the person you were talking to, but I wasn't nervous about the wedding. And I had coworkers get pissed off at me because of that, because I wasn't like some emotional wreck. I was like, no, we got things taken care of. We got the venue taken care of. We got, outfits taken care of. We got food taken care of. Like photographer, we got everything taken care of. It's now just wait until the day and then just going through it. Like that was it. Like everything else was, everything was taken care of. We had planned for, everything we could plan for. So, but these people, yeah, they drove me nuts working with all those people, because they're sitting there getting pissed off at me for not, being an emotional wreck. And I'm like, you may have been an emotional wreck. That doesn't mean I have to be one.
No, I think I'll answer it, when we come back from you're coming down there too, to Punta Cana, but the all-inclusive wedding is, I think at this point before it, is the way to go, because everyone's on vacation. Everyone should be in a good mood. And you don't need to like book anything for the weekend and like, okay, I gotta do my day job and then go to this wedding on this night, and then I have to be able to come back for this and do all that. It's like, you're there, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're all in it together.
Yeah.
Which I'm excited about.
Just people being sober enough to stand up.
Yeah.
That's going to be the
looking back, maybe a morning wedding ceremony would have been better than an evening ceremony at an all-inclusive resort, right? It's like, hey, everyone, the wedding's at 10 a.m. So get some sleep.
Get some breakfast.
Get some breakfast in you. And after the wedding, we'll see you at the pool. So we're doing a little different. We're doing what they normally do, which is at night. But I think it'll be a fantastic thing.
Yeah.
The next adventure thing for me, and I'll put it up on the screen if you're good with it, unless you have more to talk about.
Go ahead.
Can never see these things anymore. But the next adventure thing for me, Bray says, the all-inclusive. it's going to come whether you're prepared for it or not. And I think the best thing you can do is be prepared for it and not always look for it. We've kind of talked about this over the years in this podcast, that I think that those, and you mentioned it earlier, Nate, those that are looking for the next best thing or the next step all the time, only primarily, that's it. That's what they live for. The adventurous type, if you want to call it that in certain ways, chasing the next high, chasing the next promotion, chasing just whatever is going to make you feel like it's new, is a short-lived and a long-term detriment to a point. It is finding the balance. We talk about the balance and the flavor of whiskey and cigars all the time, and some of the best ones are the ones that aren't just that one note.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not the what's new. It's, you got to find that balance between what excites you and then challenge yourself to actively make sure that the things that you're enjoying continually excite you. Remind yourself that you're enjoying this.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is an active thing. You know, something that someone else said to me today was that, and I won't say specifically, might be part of my vows, so I'm not going to like spoil it here, but the active part, the verb of things that you do, the things that you're feeling, are more important than just saying it. You know, they say actions speak louder than words, and I think that is very, very apparent and very relative of when you talk about the next adventure, is that you can talk about what you want to do next. You can talk about what you want life to be. You can talk about what your career should be and what you want it to be, but it's what you're doing actively, making those words, changing things from like nouns to verbs, adverbs, maybe. No, more verbs. Making it an action. Staying active in life, staying active in your day-to-day. Don't be complacent, but at the same time, don't just look for what's next, what's new. I mean, the next adventure could always be the next chapter in the current adventure that you're in.
Well, there's that balance of finding the comfort zone, but also the adventure. You know, there are things that, because I remember one time early on in our marriage, you know, I was hanging out with my dad, and he's like, "Hey, so what, you know, what did you do today?" Or, you know, what'd you do? You know, simple questions like, "What'd you have for dinner last night?" And I was like, "Oh, we had sushi for dinner." And my dad looked at Jess and he's like, "You got him to eat sushi?"
Yeah.
I never
Nice.
would have thought my son would eat sushi and like it.
Nice.
Or what, food, drink, cigars, you know, relationship stuff. You know, try something, you don't like it, cool, you go back to where you were, but you can't just contain yourself to this one thing, because, you know, if you're in a career and that career, you know, the company around you grows, but you stay where you are,
Yeah,
you're going to get left in the dust.
Mhm.
You're going to get left behind. You're going to be the dinosaur in the company that when the company's making changes, they look at you and they're like, yeah, you're not someone who's grown with the company.
You're not relevant.
Like, there's no point in keeping you on. We're going to bring on someone else who's younger and more adventurous, and, you know, going to try to, you know, fit the model that we have now. And it's like, all right, now you just had change thrust upon you.
Yeah.
You got to find something else. My current career, never would have thought that I'd have a job where I was selling wine and liquor.
Love it.
Never would have thought it. The certain wines that we enjoy now, you know, 3 years ago, never would have thought like those.
No, certainly not.
Some of my favorite things. And so it started out as like, all right, I'm going to do, you know, yes, I have a new career. I need to learn about this stuff. And I went full into trying as many different things as I could. One of the things I love about my job is when sales reps come in and they they try us on new products.
Yeah.
You know, you get the same thing in the cigar community.
Sure.
You get reps that come in like, hey, here's these 3 new cigars that we're coming out with. And you try those and you try and find out, okay, this is good, but do we have a market for it? Do we have the customers for that?
Right.
Like you can have the absolute greatest cigar, but if you don't have the market for it, you're not going to bring it on. Same thing in the wine industry. You could have an absolutely fantastic wine, but if you don't have the customers that are going to buy it, then that's not what you're going to carry. You know, the stores that sit there and K-stack barefoot, they're not going to, you know, carry Sassicaia.
Right.
They're not going to, they're not going to carry Harlan and, stuff like that. And, I've had one of my favorite interactions I had with a customer. Customer came in and threw out the first name of a wine, but it's actually from a winery. And I was like, do you mean the $21 bottle or the $70 bottle? And they're like, oh, the 21. I would never spend $70 on a bottle for myself. And I told that person, like, no, I had both of these bottles like in back-to-back days.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the differences between them. And that customer decided, like, you know what? Yeah, I'll treat myself. I'll get this $70 bottle. That person now comes back every Christmas to buy that bottle for themselves.
I love that.
They start, like, I inadvertently started a new Christmas tradition for that customer.
Love that.
And that's something that customer never would have done, but they were open-minded enough to try something else and not just drink the same thing over and over. You drink the same thing, you're going to be bored. You smoke the same thing, you're going to be bored. You do the same thing at home, you're going to be bored. You go to work, you come home, you eat dinner, you watch TV, you go to bed.
Yeah.
Like, what? Eventually, you're going to hit a point in your life where you're like, what are we doing?
Or die.
Or die. You're just doing the same thing over and over. Both of you get bored, and then someone, not everyone, someone then sits in that relationship, then sits there and goes, am I bored with the situation that I'm in, or am I bored with the person? And as soon as that thought creeps in their head, fuck, because now you got some work to do. Both
usually it's the situation that is then translated to the person.
Yes,
yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
But a smart person,
career-wise,
a smart person would sit there and realize, like, okay, the issue's not necessarily with the company or with the person. It's I'm stuck in this small box that I put myself in.
Yeah.
All right. I got to grow outside of that box. I need a bigger box or I need a different box. And you have to work through that, because that change may just be temporary. Yep. But if you make a long-term decision for a short-term problem,
mm-hmm.
that's when you're going to find more trouble, I believe.
I agree with you. Well said. Well said. That being said, closing remarks. We'll be interested to see how part 2 of these comments, you see them up on the screen there. We're going to see how that goes.
A lot of interaction in part 2 compared to part 1.
I know.
I like
it.
it.
So we'll see if we can get more people in there. My bad for not promoting the fact that we had the guys on tonight. So that I know it's tough to keep up with our schedule now that we're every other week. We've got another one in 2 weeks coming up. And then June will be a little interesting because of my wedding and the trip. So we will keep a better schedule of what's coming up and when, so you guys can tune in live and be a part of this. But I do appreciate all you guys sticking with us and staying loyal to the show. Cheers. Happy Whiskey Wednesday. As we sign off, you guys enjoy your week, and we will see you guys very, very soon in about 2 weeks. Stay active in the Bourbon and BS community page on Facebook, and hopefully we can keep the conversation going. Cheers and enjoy your night, guys.